Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a realm gentler than a swooning settee, yet somehow far, far tougher. The everyday existence of Victorian ladies, that's correct. While your spine relaxes on a modern mattress, we're about to slide sideways into a universe of stays tighter than your email folder, social conventions more intricate than your latest group message, and standards so elevated they make your relatives seem practically reasonable. If you've ever felt swamped by household chores, criticized by strangers, or wounded by the gentle cruelty of your husband wanting you to beam more often, well done. You'd belong perfectly. Before we get trapped in a gown with more fastenings than mission control, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. But only if you genuinely appreciate what I create here. Leave a comment telling me what time it is and where you're tuning in from. Now, lower those lights, turn on your fan for that Victorian ghost house atmosphere, and let's get you settled. Let's take a breath for a second. Have you ever pondered what Victorian ladies actually did throughout their days? Did they ever consume anything besides tasteless custard? How much time did dressing require? And did anyone ever confess they couldn't catch their breath? How did they manage to read when there were 17 visiting cards to respond to before morning meal? What was their exercise regimen? Hauling a fainting couch upstairs or fending off overzealous gentleman callers? Were they truly fixated on needlework? Or was that simply a socially proper method to dodge conversations with their family members? Well done. You've just awakened in the year 1875. You're wearing a frilled nightdress. You can hear the racket of coal being delivered outside. And there's a strong possibility you'll be criticised for blinking too noisily before midday. Best of luck. You stir in a bed stacked so towering with covers, you momentarily wonder whether you're being gradually suffocated by a caring relative. The fireplace in your bedroom died out hours earlier, and the atmosphere is sharp enough to freeze your aspirations and fantasies. Welcome to a Victorian dawn, where rising is an achievement, and your initial choice is whether to summon the housemaid, or simply hope she's already hovering with tea and disapproval. Let's paint the picture. You're wrapped in a four-poster bed draped with sufficient material to cover a modest dance hall, resting flat on a mattress filled with horsehair, goose feathers, or, if you're unfortunate, something that used to be hay and now only reeks like regret. Overhead hangs a thick velvet cover that shuts out not just daylight, but also any remaining hopes you harboured about being an early riser. You are essentially sleeping in the most over-engineered cushion fortress history has ever created. There's no wake-up call device. Instead, you are roused by a symphony of Victorian household sounds. The far-off clatter of coal being dumped into a bucket, the gentle scraping of a maid carefully entering your room, and the muffled thump of your own remorse for staying awake until midnight reading Charlotte Bronte under the blankets. Perhaps you're fortunate and someone has rekindled the fire, or maybe you're already mentally composing your gracious yet firm complaint about frozen extremities in the sitting room. Later you think about tunnelling deeper, but you understand what's approaching. The day will not pause for you, and neither will your social duties. The atmosphere is so frigid your exhales come out in small clouds, and you briefly consider inventing modern heating just to avoid exiting the bed. But this is the Victorian period, so your sole option is to reach for the bell. Tug a fringed cord hanging handily at your bedside, which, when pulled, alerts the maid that it's time to commence the morning's elaborate performance. The maid appears quietly critical in her perfectly pressed cap, carrying a tray of weak tea, a thin slice of toast, and the faint hope that today you won't need the chamber vessel. Immediately she parts the heavy curtains, allowing in the magnificent British sunshine. Grey, filtered and slightly moist, like being gently smacked awake by a cloud bank, you are now visible to the outside world, or at least to the neighbour's groundskeeper, who is either pruning the bushes, or more probably, listening in for gossip material. The next step in the morning struggle is the warming bottle ritual, not the entertaining type. This is the Victorian heated water container, recently filled from the kitchen pot and wrapped in cloth. It's been maintaining your toes, at a cozy 32 degrees Fahrenheit all night, and now needs to be awkwardly passed to the maid, who will replace it with one for tonight's bedtime. Try not to make eye contact. You both understand how this works. You swing your legs from bed, instantly regretting it as your feet contact the icy floor. No modern heating means your toes have just touched what Victorian builders call characterful original floorboards and what you call frostbite gambling. If you're well off, there might be a worn carpet underfoot. If not, you're experiencing the historical equivalent of the ice water challenge. Getting clothed is still a distant terror. First, you must confront the notorious morning cleansing, a pitcher of water which was heated when the maid delivered it roughly 30 minutes ago. Now sits ice cold on the washing table. You splash your face, gasping like a fish thrown onto a glacier, and pat yourself dry with a towel so rigid it could probably serve as a cookie sheet. Cleanliness, Victorian fashion, is basically a penalty for waking up. While you try to restore blood flow to your fingers and toes, your thoughts drift to your daily responsibilities, a schedule packed with light activity, endless correspondence, and fretting about whether your cousin's latest bonnet threatens civilization. But for now, you've won the first battle. You're upright, you're conscious, you're 80% blanket and 20% existential panic. And if you manage to avoid stumbling over the chamber pot, you're already winning the game. Welcome to the struggle of the bedroom. Same fight, different era. Before you can meet society, you must first survive the daily trial of getting dressed. This isn't grab the closest sweatshirt territory. No, you need assistance, typically from a long-suffering lady's maid, just to be wrestled into stays so restrictive they could probably modify your genetic code. Breathing is optional. Posture is required. You start the trial shivering in your undergarment, the final remaining whisper of comfort before the armour of the day. Your maid approaches with the calm resolve of a Victorian battlefield surgeon, already evaluating your ribcage and calculating the chances of you fainting before breakfast. The corset itself is a fearsome contraption, boned, tied and engineered to transform your midsection into an hourglass. Even if you were born more in the shape of a dependable bread loaf, the process is less slip-it-on and more negotiation with natural laws. You grasp the bedpost for support while your maid yanks at the ties with the kind of determination typically reserved for extracting tree roots from the earth. Each tug is accompanied by the delicate soundtrack of groaning fabric, desperate exhales, and on a fortunate day, just a touch of wheezing. This is the Victorian equivalent of interval training. Hold, inhale, endure. If you're lucky, the stays fit as designed, meaning you can almost take a complete breath and only lose sensation in one limb. If you're unlucky, you're auditioning for the starring role in a very gradual, very polite asphyxiation. Victorians believed a narrow waist was the height of beauty and self-discipline. But in reality, it's a daily competition between vanity, physics, and your body's fundamental desire to survive. But hold on, there's more. The corset is just the start. Over it goes a soft cotton underskirt, then another underskirt, then possibly a wool one if the British climate is set to damp punishment. Each underskirt is another layer of protection against both the chill and any dreams of spontaneous movement. By the time you're fully equipped, your lower half resembles a layered celebration cake, and any attempt to sit rapidly is a calculated gamble. Next comes the cage crinoline, a bell-shaped frame of whalebone or steel designed to give your skirt its fashionable breadth and ensure you occupy more space in the drawing room than a Victorian footstool. Walking through doorways becomes a tactical operation. If you misjudge the angle, you'll either jam yourself in the opening or take half the hat stand with you. If you've ever tried to parallel park a large vehicle on a crowded street, you have a sense of what it's like to navigate a breakfast room in a crinoline. Now, the outer gown. This could be cotton for daytime, silk if you're wealthy, or heavy wool if you're planning to spend several hours regretting your existence. The sleeves are snug, the buttons are endless, and every layer is designed to send a clear message you are not here for comfort. Your maid secures the dozens of tiny buttons running from your throat to your ankles, each one a tribute to patience and the world's most impractical fashion engineering. Accessories come next. Stockings held up with bands that, let's be honest, never stay positioned. A pair of boots laced to mid-calf. A covering to fill in any scandalous gaps at the neck. And of course gloves. You may be only one minor inconvenience away from losing consciousness, but at least your wrists are modestly covered. Finally, your hair must be styled, a process so complex it deserves its own tragic musical. Curls are secured, bonnets are positioned, and not a strand is allowed to escape, lest the neighbours start a complaint. A subtle spritz of lavender water completes the outfit, though after 30 minutes wrestling with the corset, what you really need is fluids and a therapy group. Fully dressed, you're prepared to meet the world. Or at least the corridor. Standing straighter, breathing more shallowly, and with a fresh appreciation for modern casual wear. It's not just dressing, it's survival Victorian fashion. Forget devouring a breakfast wrap in your vehicle. In Victorian England, breakfast is a dignified, quiet procession of tea, toast, and the crushing burden of family expectations. The good news? Oatmeal is always on hand. The bad news, so is your mother's gentle disappointment. You enter the breakfast room after your marathon struggle with corsets, petticoats, and self-esteem. The table extends so far, you're not entirely certain where it concludes. Possibly in another neighbourhood. Crisp white linens, silver utensils, and enough china to make a royal ceremony blush await you, along with at least one relative whose expression is already set to mildly dissatisfied. Taking your designated seat, never ever the head of the table unless you're the family matriarch, and even then, only if everyone else has passed away. You brace yourself for the first trial, the pouring of the tea. This isn't just a drink, it's an examination. Pour too rapidly and you risk spattering on the tablecloth. Outrage. Pour too slowly and Aunt Agnes will sigh so profoundly she might displace a rib. A delicate spoon clinks against fine china as you stir in exactly one sugar lump. Unless, of course, someone is observing, in which case it's half a lump and a performance of dietary self-control. Milk goes in after, unless you're a known rebel, in which case you might put it in before, just to see who inhales sharply. The menu is dependable, if not exactly exciting. Toast, stacked like tiny roof tiles, sits in a silver holder engineered to ensure maximum dryness by the time it reaches your plate. Oatmeal thick enough to repair holes in the wall is spooned into bowls with all the enthusiasm of a minor funeral service. If it's a special day, you might get a soft-boiled egg, or in moments of wild extravagance, a single link sausage. Everything must be consumed with the correct utensil, at the proper pace, and preferably without any visible pleasure. Conversation is allowed, but only in a quiet, proper murmur, and only on subjects that won't startle the butler or give grandmother another excuse to discuss the Crimean War. Safe topics include the climate, the garden, and whether anyone has spotted Lady Penelope's new terrier. Never mention bodily functions, the financial markets, or, heaven forbid, emotions. And then there's the looming presence of family tensions. Your father, concealed behind an impenetrable barrier of the newspaper, occasionally lowers the pages to deliver a cryptic observation about the importance of timeliness. Translation: you were 2 minutes late. Your younger siblings silently plot the destruction of the oatmeal, while your mother surveys the table with an expression that suggests both pride and a quiet terror that you'll never wed. Meanwhile, your own worry bubbles quietly along with the tea. Did you remember to keep your elbows off the table? Is your napkin in your lap, folded into an origami creation of unobtrusive respectability? Is your posture straight but not so straight as to appear rigid, which suggests nerves, which suggests a secret, which suggests you'll be the subject of post-breakfast whispers? There's a reason Victorians invented fainting sofas. Most of them were just seeking a horizontal surface where they could panic in peace. Servants float in and out, removing empty plates and replenishing the ever-dwindling toast supply. You try not to make eye contact. If you drop your utensil, do not, under any circumstances, retrieve it yourself. This is a job for a footman whose only pleasure in life may be judging how loudly you dropped it. The meal concludes not with a boisterous rush for the door, but with a gentle ripple of napkins being folded, chairs being pushed back in silence, and a final round of passive-aggressive comments about someone's hair. Looking weary, you rise, not satisfied, but emotionally drained and ready for the next trial of the day. And so ends Victorian breakfast. Less a meal, more an endurance test in taste, tact, and the subtle art of surviving your relatives before 9 in the morning. Congratulations, you passed, at least until tomorrow. You might think Victorian beauty routine means perfumed soaps and fragrant baths, but you'd be mistaken. Hair is brushed for 30 minutes with military precision, and bathing is more legend than reality. Dry shampoo? Try flower powder. Deodorant? Try fortune. Let's begin with the crowning achievement, your hair. It is both your pride and your burden to bear. Victorian hair is not just hair. It's a full-time occupation, a social thermometer, and a potential cause for family scandal. Each morning, your maid arrives equipped with a boar bristle brush, a selection of tortoiseshell combs, and the single-minded determination of a general preparing for war. The brushing process lasts so long you could probably read Jane Eyre out loud and still have time left over for the pre-breakfast headlines. Why so much brushing? Because washing your hair, like spotting a unicorn, is both rare and logistically challenging. A genuine Victorian hair washing is an epic event. Water must be carried from the kitchen, heated and hauled up the stairs by a red-faced servant who is now questioning their career path. Then there's the soap, possibly homemade, possibly harsh enough to strip paint, and always suspiciously chunky. Most women only brave a full wash once a week at most. For everyone else, freshening up means a delicate dusting of hair powder, rice flour if you're wealthy, regular flour if you're not, or in moments of quiet desperation, a little talc and a hope. The result? Hair that's slightly less greasy but now smells faintly like yesterday's dinner rolls. As for the rest of your body, the Victorian bath is more folklore than daily routine. Full immersion bathing is reserved for special occasions or pending royal visits. Most days, you make do with the basin wash, which involves a pitcher of lukewarm water, a sponge, and a strategic game of which parts are most likely to be examined by a physician, clergyman, or mother-in-law. Bathhouses exist, but are viewed with deep mistrust and sometimes outright terror. Who knows what might happen in such places? Cleanliness, socializing, enjoyment. Soap itself is a complicated matter. Fancy perfumed soap is the domain of the wealthy, and even they use it sparingly, as if every lather shaves a year off the family fortune. For everyone else, soap is a dull brown brick of lye and animal fat that doubles as an emergency spot remover and triples as a doorstop. If you're fortunate, you might have a lavender packet tucked among your linens to add a faint suggestion of cleanliness. But mostly you smell like a blend of starch, wood smoke, and whatever worry you picked up at breakfast. Deodorant. That's more of a concept than a product. The best you can hope for is to mask any offending smells with a light sprinkle of cologne or by simply never raising your arms above waist level. Victorian etiquette conveniently insists on dainty hand movements and carefully folded fans, likely because nobody wants to unleash what's lurking under all those layers. If all else fails, there's always the tried and true solution. Blame the pet? Blame the weather? Blame the French? Teeth present a different battlefield. Toothpaste exists, but it comes as a powder, often flavoured with charcoal, salt or chalk, and leaves your mouth feeling like you licked a chalkboard. Toothbrushes are made with bristles tough enough to scrub barnacles off a ship, and dental visits are an adventure only for the truly courageous. Dental floss. You're more likely to be flossing with a bit of thread you found attached to your stays. Yet, despite all this, the end result is a kind of weary elegance. You look presentable, at least from a safe social distance. Your hair is shiny, possibly from a month's worth of oil. Your face is powdered for both beauty and the concealment of facts, and your perfume is just enough to keep most people from asking questions. In Victorian England, appearing clean is far more important than being clean, and if you ever doubt it, just remember someone is brushing their hair for the full 30 minutes and pretending not to notice that you haven't had a bath since last harvest season. You, however, are ready to face the day. Oily roots, powdery scalp, and all. The highlight of your morning is the inevitable round of calling cards, tiny engraved tickets that prove to your peers you are in fact still alive and only mildly socially awkward. You'll make and receive enough visits to fill a spreadsheet, all in the pursuit of not being discussed in the wrong drawing room. Let's be clear, social calls are not optional. They're not for pleasure. They are, in fact, the foundation of the Victorian social hierarchy, a never-ending cycle of visits, return visits, thank you visits, sympathy visits, and on truly festive occasions, the "I just moved in, please don't despise me" visit. At the heart of it all is the calling card, that dainty rectangle of heavy paper printed with your name in a font so ornate it might be trying to spell something in telegraph code. The ritual begins just after breakfast, when the family butler hands you a silver tray bristling with cards. Each one is a social promissory note, a little reminder that Lady Farnsworth stopped by, and if you don't return the favour within 3 days, you'll be labelled a hermit, a snob, or, worst of all, odd. Your own stack of cards, freshly ordered from the printer, sits waiting blank on the back, ready for desperate last-minute notes. "So sorry I missed you," or the occasional passive-aggressive flourish. "Apologies for last Tuesday, indisposed due to weather and destiny." Now comes the strategy portion. Calling is not a casual stroll and knock. It is a precisely timed, logistically demanding social campaign. You must consult your visiting book, a small leather-bound journal more detailed than your financial records. In this sacred tome, you track who called when and what degree of attention each visit deserves. Failure to reciprocate within the appropriate time frame means social death, so it's less keeping up with friends and more trying not to become a cautionary tale at someone else's tea party. You set out in your best visiting dress, a garment specifically designed to signal you're only staying for 15 minutes, but are still better dressed than anyone in the household. Gloves, mandatory hat, obligatory parasol, defensive weapon and privacy shield. You climb into the family carriage or, if you're particularly unfortunate, set off on foot, bracing yourself for a morning of small talk and sitting upright on sofas that seem to have been designed by orthopedic pessimists. Arriving at the first house, you're ushered into the drawing room by a servant who will, with a straight face, inform the lady of the house that Miss So-and-so is calling. If you're fortunate, she's in. If not, you leave a card and move on, secretly relieved but forced to pretend you're devastated at missing her. If she does appear, you're in for the real test. 15 minutes of conversation as light as air and as sharp as a sword fight. Weather, health, mutual acquaintances. These are all safe subjects. Politics, money and your actual opinions are not. You sip tea, eat a biscuit so dry it could be used as packing material, and try not to drop crumbs down the front of your dress. If you can manage this while sitting with perfect posture and making eye contact just enough to seem interested, you are, by Victorian standards, flourishing. And don't get comfortable. There's a precise choreography to social calls. Stay longer than 15 minutes and you'll be seen as needy. Leave too soon and you're cold. Ask to use the powder room and you might as well declare war on etiquette itself. On especially busy days, you'll squeeze in 6 or 7 calls, each one another opportunity to accidentally offend someone's third cousin, twice removed. When you finally return home, it's time for the receiving portion. Now you must be ready to greet callers with a smile, offer a small cake, and pretend you weren't just hiding in the library, dreading human interaction. For every card you collect, another slot on your social to-do list is filled. The process never ends, it only resets. somewhere someone is always about to take offence, and every drawing room is a silent arena of reputation. In the end, the true winner of the Victorian social call is the one with the biggest stack of cards, the emptiest schedule, and the most finely honed ability to make it all look effortless while secretly longing for a day with no visitors at all. Now it's time to sit by the window and embroider something you don't care about while making just enough conversation to avoid accusations of pouting. Needlework isn't just a hobby, it's a silent competition for most patient martyr in your social circle. If you're picturing a peaceful morning, sunlight filtering gently through lace curtains as you lovingly stitch roses onto a handkerchief, let me stop you there. Needlework in the Victorian home is less a creative outlet and more a marathon of endurance, etiquette, and emotional suppression. It's the Victorian answer to both fidget toys and passive aggression. Everyone is doing it, everyone is pretending to enjoy it, and everyone is quietly praying not to stab themselves with the business end of a tapestry needle. Your tools are neatly arranged on a side table, an embroidery hoop, thimbles, scissors so sharp they could cut through family tension, and a rainbow of silk threads. There's an unfinished sampler nearby, featuring cheerful sayings like "Home Sweet Home" and "A Stitch in Time Saves 9" alongside what you secretly suspect is a coded cry for help. If you're truly accomplished, you might attempt a chair cover, a lacy doily designed to protect the furniture from gentlemen's hair oil and, presumably, any remaining will to live. The pressure is on. Your mother and 3 aunts are present, all working with the intensity of Olympic athletes and the facial expressions of martyrs auditioning for sainthood. The conversation is light, calculated, and slightly barbed. "How many stitches per minute are you managing, dear?" "That border is ambitious." "My, your French knots are so rustic." The competition isn't explicit, but everyone knows who's winning. It's whoever looks the calmest while sewing an entire alphabet onto a napkin with eyesight so strained they're seeing double. But this is more than mere busy work. Needlework is the acceptable way for women to fill hours otherwise spent questioning the futility of existence, or worse, having opinions while your fingers are occupied. You can eavesdrop on conversations, tune out tedious relatives, or perfect your serene and industrious expression for when the minister drops by unannounced. If your embroidery is truly intricate, you have an excuse to avoid the more dangerous conversational topics like marriage prospects or why you still haven't learned the piano. Occasionally someone will read aloud, uplifting literature only of course, while the rest of you nod and try to avoid sewing a flower stem straight through your skirt. Novels are frowned upon, too spicy, poetry is risky, too many feelings, so you end up listening to a selection from moral lessons for young ladies, while you attempt to make a chain stitch that doesn't look like a worm having a panic attack. The unspoken rule is never to let your hands be idle. Idleness, after all, is the first step toward moral decay, or worse, being accused of laziness by your own grandmother. So you sew handkerchiefs, table runners, mysterious sachets no one actually uses, and enough pillowcases to suffocate a small town. The ultimate goal? To create a hope chest, a trunk full of embroidered linens ready for the marriage you may or may not want, but are certainly expected to prepare for with the enthusiasm of someone packing for a trip to Antarctica. But needlework has its dangers. Dropping your needle means crawling on your knees, hunting for the tiny saboteur before the housemaid's foot finds it first. Pricked fingers are a daily reality, often hidden with stoic dignity, or, if you're feeling dramatic, displayed with a sigh for maximum sympathy. There's also the looming threat of eye strain. Victorian women regularly went half-blind by age 40, but at least the chair covers lived on. And through it all you maintain a steady, slightly glazed smile. Because in the world of extreme embroidery, it's not about enjoying yourself. It's about surviving the endless afternoon, one tiny stitch at a time, and proving to everyone that when it comes to patience, nobody suffers as beautifully as you. If you're lucky enough to steal an hour alone, you might read a novel, ideally something uplifting. Unless you're feeling scandalous and sneak a peek at the latest sensation novel, be sure to hide it under a copy of Pilgrim's Progress for plausible deniability. Reading in Victorian England is a subversive act, especially for women. It's less a leisure activity and more a covert operation conducted with the stealth and paranoia of an undercover agent. You glance furtively at the door, ears tuned for the telltale creak of your mother's footsteps or the ominous clearing of a butler's throat. On the surface, you're sitting demurely in the corner, a copy of Moral Philosophy or the Young Lady's Guide to Proper Behaviour open on your lap. But hidden behind its virtuous cover lurks something far juicier, Wilkie Collins perhaps, or the latest serialised chapters of Lady Audley's Secret. You live dangerously, of course. The reading material you select is a social statement in itself. Uplifting books, biographies, sermons, treatises on botany are safe, but dreary, much like boiled vegetables. These are the works you display proudly on your nightstand when guests come over, or when Great Aunt Millicent visits and likes to quiz you on the finer points of religious morality. But deep down, you crave a bit more excitement, a poem with an actual emotion, a novel with a heroine who faints less and acts more. Or, on days when you're feeling particularly rebellious, a forbidden French novel translated by someone who clearly had no idea what the French were actually saying. Reading, of course, comes with rules. You must sit upright, ankles crossed, and look composed, the universal code for do not disturb. But also, do not look like you're enjoying yourself too much. If you giggle, gasp, or let slip a scandalous blush, you risk alerting your chaperone, who will descend like a vulture to inspect your reading material for improper influences, emotional outbursts, or, worst of all, imagination. Sometimes you're expected to read aloud for the family, an experience best compared to dramatic hostage negotiation. You carefully choose passages devoid of romance, crime, or anything faintly suggestive. You're reading for the moral edification of the group, not for the secret thrill of a midnight tryst on the moors. Any deviation from this, such as a giggle at a double meaning, can and will be used against you in the court of family opinion. And yet, despite the scrutiny, reading is an escape within the pages of a well-worn novel. You can visit Italy, climb the Alps, or solve mysteries in foggy London, all without ever leaving the parlour. You can fall in love a dozen times before luncheon, commit daring acts of bravery, or if you're particularly bored, imagine a world in which you wear trousers and make your own breakfast. Books are also contraband currency among your friends. You trade the racier ones beneath your embroidery hoops, pass notes about the best chapters, and argue in hushed tones over whether Mr. Darcy is in fact marriage material or just a glorified introvert with boundary issues. Some books are so infamous they're known only by code. The Blue Book is tucked behind the Atlas, while that dreadful French volume is hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Prayers for Young Ladies. You become part of an underground library operating with all the secrecy of a Victorian spy ring and for all the rules. The real victory comes when you manage a full, unbothered hour with your favourite book. You curl up in a sunny window seat, lose yourself in someone else's drama, and for a little while forget that your own greatest challenge is not being caught drooling over a character with sideburns. When the hour is up, you mark your place, hide the evidence, and slip back into the world of improving pursuits, your spirit a little lighter and your appetite for mischief just slightly whetted. In the Victorian age, reading isn't just a pastime. It's a minor act of rebellion, a secret romance, and, if you're lucky, a glimpse of the world beyond the next social gathering. Sure, there are servants, but they don't actually manage themselves. Picture yourself directing a team of workers who are all secretly certain you're completely clueless. You examine the flatware, taste the broth, and struggle not to weep when you discover grime on the stair rail. Running a Victorian household isn't gentle homemaking, it's corporate leadership with extra stiffening. Your morning as domestic chief executive doesn't begin with a boardroom session. but with the daily briefing delivered by an exasperated housekeeper who rattles off updates like announcing battlefield movements in the Crimean War. The washing has turned solid on the line, the chef is losing her temper again, and someone caught the servant boy sleeping in the coal bin. If you imagined you'd simply float around in ribbons and jewellery, you've seriously misjudged what this job demands. The employee roster looks like something from a Dickens novel. Chambermaids, parlourmaids, kitchen maids, chefs, butlers, footmen, and that mysterious general helper. You're supposed to know every name, recall their birth dates, and immediately remember who's currently feuding with whom. Slip up and you'll face the kind of domestic uprising that only gets settled with bribes, typically involving pastries and an emergency consultation with Mrs. Beaton's management guide. Your opening duty involves the daily walkthrough. This becomes a formal parade from space to space, followed by no fewer than 2 maids and a fog of nervousness. You verify that beds are constructed with parade ground precision, that the sitting room pillows are fluffed to standard density, and that nobody, absolutely nobody, has tracked dirty prints across the stairway. Every violation gets recorded with a breath and a gentle reminder, because raising your voice means the entire household will spend 7 days gossiping about your temperament. Down in the cooking area, you sample the broth, not for enjoyment, but as protection against culinary rebellion. If it's overly seasoned, the cook stares at you as if you've personally attacked her heritage. If it lacks flavour, you get offered additional seasoning with a grin sharp enough to cut toast. Menu selection becomes a negotiation process. What can you present that's remarkable, economical, and unlikely to trigger social warfare? In the storage room, it resembles a cooking competition where the surprise ingredients are yesterday's root vegetables and anxiety. Handling the finances becomes a danger zone. The household records are a maze of receipts, promissory notes, and ledgers written in script that might be confused with ancient symbols. You attempt to track spending on lamp fuel, meat, and sufficient starch to make your table linens stand at attention. God forbid you exceed the budget. Nothing sparks an emergency conference with your husband like an unexpected penny spent on extra heating coal. Then comes the theatre, the maid who weeps because the butler relocated her cleaning supplies, the footman with a puzzling injury that happened near the silver service, again ma'am, and the continuing puzzle of who keeps abandoning half-consumed cookies behind the timepiece. Every argument tests your negotiation abilities. Your leadership approach becomes a blend of mother figure, ruler, counsellor, and kind-hearted dictator. Despite how it looks, there's no break time. You're available for every emergency, every jammed lock, every unexplained mark on the parlour rug. Company arrives and you transform into a conductor directing a flawless performance of welcomes, refreshments, and perfectly timed remarks about the climate. If the meal proceeds without incident and nobody ignites the drapes, you celebrate success. All this, remember, wrapped in layers of petticoats and corsets, keeping a cheerful expression and never once confessing you'd prefer hiding beneath the steps with the house cat. So when someone next says, "But you have assistants," recall that you're not relaxing. You're managing an empire where dust particles are insurgents and a serving spoon serves as your royal staff. Congratulations, you're a chief executive and your performance review arrives whenever your mother-in-law appears without warning. Your primary daily exercise involves verbal sparring, deflecting nosy inquiries, delivering precisely the right measure of cleverness, and never ever confessing you couldn't care less about the climate. Every exchange becomes a masterclass in avoiding offence to anyone who could demolish your social position with one lifted eyebrow. Let's be honest. The true battlefield of Victorian society isn't fought with blades or even with dining utensils, but through words. The skill to communicate everything and nothing simultaneously represents the most precious ability any woman can master. The contest is refined. If chess involved more lace and fewer actual strategies, it would mirror Victorian dialogue. You're not simply talking, you're wielding a barrier of correctness, a curtain of courtesies, and when situations become dire, a diversionary assault of botanical discussion. You begin your day with practice rounds, exchanging polite praise with your household over the morning meal, each comment sharpened with just a touch of hidden meaning. You appear quite refreshed, dear. I notice you managed the corset once more. Did you rest peacefully? Translation: I detected every floorboard groan and know you smuggled that book beneath your pillow. Every inquiry becomes a puzzle. Every response, a minor diplomatic crisis waiting to unfold. As you progress into the social hours, the risks escalate. The parlour serves as your arena. Here you encounter a succession of friends, family members, and that one neighbour who frankly shows more interest in your clothes line than your thoughts. Subjects are carefully controlled. The climate always remains safe territory. Unless naturally it's pouring and someone's new hat has drooped, in which case the atmosphere might turn frosty. Gardening stays a dependable choice, but proceed carefully. Complimenting the incorrect rosebush might trigger an entire afternoon of subtly hostile horticultural combat. Intelligence is essential, but only in controlled portions. Too sharp and you risk being labelled improper. Too boring and you're tedious. The secret involves dropping just enough clever remarks to demonstrate you possess a brain, but not enough to suggest you might actually employ it for anything risky, like forming independent thoughts. Practice expressions like, how amusing and isn't that remarkable, which function for virtually every situation, from learning about a neighbour's new carriage to enduring a lecture about turnips. Then arrive the conversational snares. Someone inquires, when will you visit Bath this season? What they actually mean. Why haven't you departed town yet? A well-intentioned aunt asks about your needlework. Is it complete? But the proper response always remains, nearly aunt. Thank you for inquiring. Never, I'd rather consume the thread. The technique involves responding without responding, replying without revealing, and above everything, avoiding giving anyone something genuinely fascinating to repeat. But conversation isn't merely about protection, it's about attack too. Launch a calculated compliment and you can improve your status. Your daughter's piano performance is developing beautifully functions, even if last evening's recital sounded like two felines in a wind instrument. Provide a subtle redirection when topics drift into hazardous territory. Oh, what an attractive vase. Was that from your coastal journey? If everything else fails, summon a coughing episode, drop a teacup, or pretend intense fascination with the wall covering. The biggest threat, naturally, is unintentional scandal. One misplaced jest, one unguarded viewpoint, and your standing could be destroyed by the next mail delivery. A relative's thoughtless mention of a book could become a family emergency. Contradicting a clergyman, laughing too boisterously, or being observed alone with the wrong relation can all result in becoming the featured topic at the next rumour banquet. The answer? Smile, agree, and remember. Quiet is sometimes the most cutting response. At days and after spending hours navigating around conversational explosives, you're drained, mentally keener than a lawyer, but emotionally exhausted. You've protected your secrets, distributed compliments, avoided all discussion of politics, and managed not to confess that you genuinely don't mind if it precipitates or not. Congratulations! You have conquered the skill of Victorian dialogue, expressing everything necessary and nothing whatsoever in 4 syllables or fewer. Physical conditioning isn't about building muscle, it's about moving gracefully in circles while pretending not to be tedious. Strolling outdoors gets permitted if you're supervised, bundled properly, and immune to taunts from street children. Victorian fitness focuses less on burning energy and more on burning daylight in the most elegant manner possible. The expression taking a turn about the room doesn't indicate anything as extreme as aerobics or even brisk walking. It means exactly that. You rise from your sewing, gather your skirts, and begin circling the perimeter of the largest available space. Drawing room, music room, or, for the ambitious, the lengthy hallway at a dignified 2 miles per century. This isn't about cardiac health, it's about appearing slightly breathless but never actually sweating. Naturally, you're not alone in your indoor circuits. Your mother, sisters, and at least one cousin have joined the procession, making the entire event resemble the world's most lethargic dance line. Discussion must stay light, volume must remain low, and bearing must be perfect. Slumping is for the weak or worse, for the French. You check your reflection in the looking glass every half circuit to verify that your hair remains secured and your expression stays set to pleasantly engaged, even as your spirit pleads for an exercise machine and sound-blocking headphones. If you grow weary of this endless oval, you might be allowed an outdoor walk, weather and propriety permitting. This requires a procedure only marginally less complex than preparing for an Arctic expedition. First, you must locate a chaperone, a necessity that ensures you're shielded from both the weather and any lurking dangerous bachelors. Then comes the bundling: shawl, gloves, bonnet, overcoat, and the absolutely essential parasol. The objective is to emerge into the sunlight as a mobile tower of wool and ribbons, with only a fragment of face visible between your hat brim and scarf. Once outdoors, the air is fresh and invigorating, and so are the criticisms from every passing neighbour. A successful outing means returning home neither flushed nor rumpled, with not a hair strand displaced and your shoes only lightly soiled by mud. Should you venture farther, perhaps to the park or along the walkway, you'll be accompanied by other women on identical missions, everyone quietly pretending this qualifies as athletics, while exchanging looks that say, "If I stumble on this cobblestone and land in a puddle, just let me sink." And don't overlook the constantly observant eyes of small children and street urchins who offer running commentary. "Look at her bonnet, miss. Careful. Don't doze off on your feet." You maintain your chin elevated and glide past, pretending not to notice. In a sense, it's a training session for your social abilities as much as your legs. Should you possess a more adventurous spirit, there are options. Croquet on the grass gets allowed, provided you don't swing the mallet with excessive vigour. If you're a genuine rebel, you might enjoy a spirited horseback ride, but even that's best done at a respectable walk and under strict observation. Anything more vigorous risks perspiring, and perspiring is absolutely prohibited except in private darkened chambers with a physician's approval. Ultimately, Victorian exercise concerns the appearance of activity. You return home with cheeks only faintly rosy, posture even straighter, and declare you feel invigorated. Code for "thank heavens that's finished." No fitness membership necessary. Just 400 yards of polished flooring and the iron determination not to perish from boredom. You return to your chair, pulse rate unchanged, and quietly wonder if walking in circles represents an allegory for Victorian existence itself. Considerable movement, but never actually progressing anywhere. And just like that, you've completed your exercise for the day without breaking a sweat or a single regulation. Afternoon involves music rehearsal, piano, harp, or vocals, preferably all three, and preferably poorly. Every missed note serves as a reminder that your genuine worth gets measured in social elegance, not musical talent. Victorian music rehearsal is less aspiring virtuoso and more acoustic decoration. The family expects the gentle tinkling of a piano drifting from the parlour as much a symbol of middle-class respectability as lace window treatments or a reliable supply of potted plants. You, however, approach the keyboard with all the enthusiasm of someone heading to their own execution, albeit an execution with sheet music and an audience of critical relatives. The piano itself is a Victorian wonder, upright, gleaming and constantly out of tune due to the changeable English climate. You sit erect, rigid, ankles crossed, hands perfectly positioned, at least until you strike your first incorrect note, at which point your youngest sibling sighs with the dramatic disappointment of a frustrated critic. You struggle through scales, your fingers stumbling over passages that sound like a small creature attempting to escape through the keys. Your music instructor, if present, hovers over you and taps the sheet music with a pencil, somehow expressing both patience and profound existential suffering. The same applies to harp or vocals. The harp is an instrument designed by someone who genuinely despised other people's spines. You attempt a simple tune and quickly discover the sound you're producing is less heavenly serenade and more feline wrestling with laundry rope. As for singing, you project your voice with all the bravery of someone who knows Aunt Gertrude is listening from the adjacent room, ears honed by decades of amateur theatre and crushed dreams. Errors are unavoidable. Wrong note, blame the climate, missed rhythm, the sheet music must have shifted, clashing chord, clearly the piano's fault. In Victorian existence, it's not about reaching musical mastery. It's about showing the proper combination of effort, modesty, and willingness to be gently embarrassed. If you're a genius, wonderful. If not, smile and hope nobody recalls your attempt at green sleeves. Music, after all, is about developing the right reputation. You perform for guests, for family, for anyone who will listen, or at least pretend to. Your reward for surviving another round of the Blue Danube is a flutter of courteous applause and a mild suggestion to rehearse a bit more, dear. You may secretly fantasize about burning the sheet music and relocating to Paris to become a cabaret performer, but you know better. In Victorian England, modest suffering is always preferable to open revolt. And just in case you thought you could escape, every respectable young woman is expected to play at least one instrument, extra credit for two, or for pretending to enjoy a little light composition, usually in the form of a waltz that sounds suspiciously like the last three waltzes. You might exchange music with friends, all while maintaining the delicate pretense that your hand occasionally slips into a more daring piece, like a forbidden polka. If you are particularly unfortunate, there's a family recital. The drawing room is reorganized, the good chairs are polished, and the entire household is summoned to witness your struggle with Beethoven. The applause is always courteous, the criticism always disguised. You played with such emotion, darling. Perhaps a little less next time. When the ordeal is finally over, you close the piano lid with a sigh of relief, fingers tingling and pride only slightly bruised. You survived. You may never be invited to the Royal Albert Hall, but at least you managed not to break a string or accidentally start a polka riot. Congratulations. You have fulfilled your obligation as the living soundtrack of the Victorian home. And if you ever question your value, just remember, nobody ever criticized a young woman for playing too softly. But playing too well? That's practically scandalous. Maintaining connections with your friends and family means writing endless letters, each longer than a contemporary novel, and about as engaging as reading the directions for a foot soak. Stationery sales must be sky high. If you thought modern texting was draining, welcome to the Victorian universe, where catching up requires several hours of penmanship, half a bottle of ink, and the looming threat of hand cramps so severe you start envying the family dog. Every acquaintance, every cousin, and every distant godmother expects a handwritten update delivered with maximum flourish and zero spelling mistakes. In an era before spell check, every letter you send is a potential public relations catastrophe, a minor literary epic that will be examined, preserved, and if you're truly unlucky, read aloud at future family gatherings. You start by choosing the right paper. This is no ordinary notebook sheet. We're discussing creamy monogrammed pages stored in a box so refined it practically sneers at your sloppy handwriting. Ink must be black, or possibly blue-black, if you're feeling daring. The pen, because yes, it's still fashionable to use one, must be sharpened to a point so precise it could serve as a surgical tool. Heaven help you if you smudge. Even a tiny blot will haunt you for weeks. The first challenge? The greeting. Dearest Cousin Arabella, I trust this letter finds you in the finest of health and spirits. Victorian etiquette requires the opening paragraph to be both ornate and completely devoid of actual information. 10 lines in, you've covered the weather, the state of your mother's nerves, and the remarkable endurance of your houseplants. You haven't even reached the purpose for your letter yet. Next, the main content. This is where the real challenge begins. You must recount all major events: visitors, illnesses, dances attended, marriages proposed, marriages declined, servants hired, servants dismissed, and if you're truly desperate, the relative excitement of a new tablecloth. Each detail is stretched out, like an episode of a drama series, only with more passive-aggressive commentary. Mrs. Worthington's tea was a tremendous success, though some might say her lemon cakes were more ambitious than appetizing. Translation: I barely survived. Please send assistance, but the real purpose of letter writing is information control. You want to keep your friends close, your relatives closer, and your enemies bewildered. Subtle brags are woven into humble boasts. I have been quite occupied with my needlework, as my sampler for Lady Highmore's charity will be exhibited at the county fair. You carefully avoid mentioning that you punctured yourself with the embroidery needle no fewer than 6 times. Halfway through page 3, your hand is cramping, your ink is depleting, and you've developed a new appreciation for the humble abbreviation. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as LOL in Victorian correspondence. Every sentence is a complete thought, every emotion is painstakingly spelled out. If you need to include a joke, it must be disguised as an anecdote about your neighbour's goose. Pray forgive my poor jest, but I could not help but chuckle when... Then there's the conclusion. Victorian etiquette books recommend at least 4 complimentary phrases. With fondest affection, your ever-devoted friend, I remain, as always, your humble servant. And, for good measure, may Providence smile upon you and yours. By the end, your signature is barely readable and your hand is trembling like a carriage on a country road. The letter is finally completed, but you're not finished yet. You must fold it precisely. Address the envelope with calligraphy that would impress a monk. Seal it with a dab of wax, monogrammed, obviously, and hand it off to a footman for mailing. No instant delivery here. Your words will travel by carriage, rail, and sheer force of etiquette. And then the cycle continues. Each letter answered generates 3 more in response, each longer and more indirect than the last. You begin to suspect this is how Victorians secretly trained for marathons, not with running, but with relentless correspondence. Congratulations, you've completed your daily Victorian texting workout. No emojis required, just the faint, lingering ache of carpal tunnel, and the hope that maybe next week someone will invent the postcard. At some point you must face the drawing room, where everyone assembles to critique each other's clothing, gossip, and display an uncanny ability to sip tea without ever blinking. It's like a silent auction for social standing, and you're the item everyone's inspecting. Welcome to the daily social obstacle course. The drawing room is the Victorian equivalent to the modern group chat, only everyone is much more overdressed, and the read receipts are delivered by the arch of an eyebrow. There is a careful choreography to the afternoon gathering. You enter with the poise of someone walking onto the stage at the world's least exciting beauty contest. You smile just enough to appear friendly, but not so much that anyone suspects you're planning your exit. Seats are chosen with all the political calculation of a congressional debate. Too near the fireplace and you're accused of hoarding the heat. Too close to the window and you're either fishing for compliments about your complexion or eavesdropping on the groundskeeper. The safest position is a sturdy armchair, preferably one with a direct view of the tea service and at least 2 escape routes. Once seated, the real competitions begin. The first event, wardrobe inspection. Everyone subtly examines everyone else's attire. Bonnets are evaluated, shawls ranked, and buttons quietly counted. Your dress is last season's shade of mauve. Risky. Your hemline is a 1/4 inch too high. Expect an avalanche of side-eye from Mrs. Henley, who still remembers your infamous ankle incident at the garden party. Tea is served with military precision, the hostess pouring without spilling a drop, her hands steady despite the simmering tension in the air. Biscuits are passed around, each taken with a thank you murmured so softly it might as well be telepathy. You try not to crumble your shortbread in your lap. Last week's mishap is still the talk of 3 counties, and then the conversation. Safe topics are chosen with the precision of a surgeon. The weather, the roses, the subtle drama of Lady Bracknell's missing parakeet. The challenge is to say as much as possible while revealing as little as necessary. Any mention of money, illness, or, heaven forbid, personal feelings is met with the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals. If someone does let slip a piece of juicy gossip, it's quickly camouflaged with a bland observation about the price of coal, or a deep dive into the nuances of embroidery thread. Children, if present, are expected to be seen and not heard. They hover by the door, desperate for escape, like interns at a board meeting who haven't had lunch. Elderly relatives doze with one eye open, always ready to spring into action should someone attempt to mention politics. All the while, there is a constant, silent competition. Who can appear the most unbothered? It's a battle waged with posture, eye contact, and the ability to eat a biscuit without scattering crumbs on the carpet. One poorly timed yawn and you risk a full week of concerned comments about your health. And of course, there's the gossip minefield. Information is traded in whispers and sidelong glances. Who's engaged? Who's fallen ill? Who had the audacity to laugh too loudly in church? The stories are embellished with every retelling until what began as an innocent walk in the park is transformed into a tale of social ruin and possibly a duel. When the tea grows cold and the conversation has circled back to the weather for the 3rd time, it's time to make your exit. This too is a dance. Leave too early and you're rude. Linger too long and you're desperate. The trick is to glide out with a nod, a soft farewell, and the faintest suggestion that you have more interesting engagements awaiting you. You survived the drawing room. You're exhausted, over-caffeinated, and slightly sore from sitting up straight for 2 hours, but you did it. You faced the social gauntlet and emerged with your reputation mostly intact. In the world of Victorian society, coming close to success means something entirely different than today. Need a fresh hat or a discreet bottle of hair remedy? Time to brave the public sphere and spend hours pretending the cost of lace doesn't make you dizzy. Stay alert. Store owners can detect uncertainty and social discomfort from blocks away. Victorian purchasing isn't, despite what contemporary publications might suggest, an activity of personal liberation and individual expression. It's a careful, anxiety-inducing public ceremony with the tension of a gambling den and price tags that match. Your morning starts with a catalogue written in your most elegant script. Hat, gloves, thread spool, perhaps some exotic sweets. If you're feeling both adventurous and wealthy, your mother reviews your catalogue. Then, for added security, she quizzes you on distinguishing between appropriate and flashy decorations. Before stepping outside, there's the ritual. You must dress appropriately for shopping, meaning your finest street dress, gloves, and a look that suggests, I could buy this entire establishment, yet I'll still bargain over a needle. Any sign of poor appearance risks being dismissed by clerks. Or worse still, enduring a sermon on frugality from Mrs. Henderson, who's definitely listening from behind her tower of embroidered napkins. Outside, you merge with the stream of customers on the busy main street, each as nervous as yourself, all pretending not to judge each other's hat selections. Your escort hovers like personal protection, equipped with both moral guidance and sharp ears for rumours. The store windows sparkle with tempting displays, silk ribbons, plumed bonnets, and mysterious bottles promising everything from glowing complexion to matrimony within 2 weeks. Inside the establishment, the real performance starts. The merchant stands at the counter, already evaluating you. Are you a genuine buyer or just sampling the complimentary rose water? Do you carry sufficient funds for quality lace, or should you be politely steered towards the discount pile? Your fingers shake slightly as you ask, Just some ribbon, if you please. You struggle not to gasp hearing the cost, roughly equivalent to a week's heating or 3 months of lower back strain from sewing. Shopping for headwear particularly becomes a diplomatic challenge. The clerk produces choices at lightning speed, each more ornate than the previous, while subtly implying that outdated styles suit practical women. You nod knowingly, as though you've always understood that emerald velvet suits the determined while sapphire silk fits the modest. You sample bonnets, examine yourself in a slightly distorted mirror, and pretend to consider while your chaperone silently hopes you won't select anything that might attract negative attention, such as a feather. Yet it extends beyond clothing. Every purchase makes a social declaration. Pick an extravagant ribbon and risk the milliner's disapproving glance and neighbourhood whispers. Choose plain tan gloves and everyone assumes you're grieving, or worse, economising. The safest route involves selecting something understated, paying with exact coins, and hoping the shopkeeper doesn't attempt selling you the latest popular hair treatment. No, you don't want your locks smelling like flowers. An overwhelming dread follows. Every purchase brings waves of remorse. Did you overspend? Has your household budget been destroyed? Is owning 2 pairs of gloves in one existence excessive? You exit the shop with your bundle wrapped in brown paper and a sudden need to apologise to your father, your savings, and possibly your future grandchildren. Back outside, the sunshine appears brighter, fellow shoppers less threatening. You walk home gripping your purchases, face flushed from both effort and financial worry. Shopping, you realise, represents the ultimate Victorian balancing act. One incorrect purchase makes you a warning story. One proper purchase gets discussed for decades. You arrive home, place your packages on the entrance table and promise never to shop again. At least until the next sale on exotic feathers. Retail therapy, Victorian style, maximum guilt, minimum joy, and at least 3 new tales. For the parlour, tea focuses less on refreshment and more on surviving an ordeal of pastries, regulations, and relatives wanting to know about your marriage prospects. No, you cannot have another biscuit unless you also accept a complete serving of personal criticism. In Victorian homes, afternoon tea isn't relaxation. It's an establishment, a carefully arranged social challenge course that would terrify even experienced competitors. You enter the parlour greeted by gentle china rattling, the sweet, threatening scent of fresh cake, and a room filled with relatives who seem solely concerned with your future, your figure, and the proper method for eating a watercress sandwich. First, seating arrangements. Aunt Martha always claims the chair nearest the tea service, positioned to intercept the initial, and importantly, the largest cake portion. You attempt sitting somewhere secure, not close enough to become a primary target for inquiries, yet not distant enough to appear secretive, even when you are. The smallest children hover near the sweet tarts, prepared to strike once adults look elsewhere. Everyone else sits on chair edges, alert, composed, and quietly planning the optimal path to the scones. Then arrives the tea ceremony, a ritual so exact it makes formal church service seem improvised. The hostess keeps one eye on the teapot, another on her guests, ready to catch anyone daring to add sugar before cream, a mistake only marginally less severe than embezzlement. You receive your cup with polite acknowledgement, stir precisely 3 times, and sip without noise, regardless of temperature. Pity anyone who dips a cookie when Aunt Martha watches. Dipping, in her opinion, begins society's complete breakdown. The refreshments, meanwhile, serve as both pleasure and pitfall. Platters appear with neat sandwich rows, crusts removed, fillings suspiciously mild, and scone pyramids dusted with enough powdered sugar to mask the flavour of gentle letdown. The cake variety impresses, but beware taking a slice exceeding your designated portion. Every bite gets observed, every crumb evaluated, every second scone quietly recorded by the family's self-appointed nutrition monitor. Yet tea transcends eating. It involves conversation. or more precisely, interrogation before witnesses. Once your mouth fills, Aunt Martha strikes. So, sweetheart, when's the wedding? I've wondered since you reached 16, have you considered Lord Hamilton? He maintains a fine income for someone so unremarkable. My matchmaking abilities are all preventing your eternal singleness. You deflect graciously with rehearsed diversions. Oh, I'm quite occupied with my embroidery, Aunt. What delightful weather we're enjoying. Wouldn't you agree? Is that a robin in the yard? Any distraction works. Meanwhile, your cousins smirk behind their teacups, having already endured their questioning rounds, or better yet, having wed and become the questioners themselves. When conversation stalls, someone inevitably mentions recent local drama. An escaped servant, a neighbour's dog caught destroying the garden, or, heaven preserve you, your supposed attraction to the minister's son. The gossip swirls with steam from the teapot, sweetened with sugar and malice, yet somehow you must endure. The scones disappear, the cake gets conquered, and Aunt Martha, momentarily content, shifts her attention to criticising someone else's posture. You escape as soon as propriety allows, your nerves shaken but surviving, promising never to attend tea again until tomorrow, when the entire performance repeats afternoon tea, where hydration remains optional but survival stays absolutely essential. Your afternoons get reserved for charitable works, which mainly involves sitting in freezing church halls, pretending concern for orphans and stitching items no orphan ever requested. Victorian charity focuses less on changing lives and more on changing your standing. In a society where laziness leads to disgrace and self-betterment becomes everyone's secondary occupation, doing good transforms into elaborate public theatre. The destination stays consistent, the neighbourhood church or parish hall, where temperature gets best described as spiritual refrigeration, and decoration consists mostly of folding chairs, serious portraits and faint musty wool odours. You arrive punctually, your arms loaded with impressive arrays of unfinished knitting, yards of cotton, and at least one copy of Moral Guidance for Youth. Around you, a circle of women settles into the earnest business of alleviating suffering, which mainly means debating who deserves help, the worthy poor versus the simply unlucky, and which family's children need the most knitted stockings. Actual orphans remain absent, presumably living their lives free from scratchy blankets and unwanted counsel. The first agenda item always involves a meeting led by the pastor's wife or the town's most intimidating matron. Records get read, plans develop, and you debate the annual charity fair logistics, a maze of decorations, baked goods, and hand-embroidered bookmarks. Someone suggests a pastry booth, someone else objects, citing last year's fruitcake nearly causing dental crisis. Someone proposes a drawing. A third objects, worried it might encourage betting among the working classes. Stitching begins. You're assigned to hem pillowcases for the local hospital or embroider initials on blankets for unknown recipients. You wonder privately whether these items ever reach their intended destinations, or if they're simply collecting in the rectory storage awaiting the next group of well-intentioned volunteers. Nobody consults the orphans about their actual needs. Certainly not another uncomfortable scarf. Naturally, the real purpose here involves companionship. The sewing circle operates less as humanitarian machinery and more as elite social networking with extra buttons. Over gentle knitting needle clicks, local news and global scandals get shared in whispered tones. Did you hear about Miss Peterson's awkward encounter with the dairyman? Lady Morrison's new hat seems positively scandalous. And naturally, has anyone spotted the assistant pastor recently? He appeared rather wan. If you're feeling defiant, you mention foreign charities, starving children in distant wars, orphans in neighbouring countries. But these receive polite nods and swift returns to local scandal. There's always one woman who takes her charitable work excessively seriously. She brings charts, organises competitions for most handkerchiefs produced, and once suggested house calls to personally deliver socks to a widower, which everyone agreed went too far. You meanwhile struggle maintaining even stitches while suppressing yawns and occasionally pricking your finger just to feel something. At afternoon's end, there's tea, lukewarm and served from a chipped pot, accompanied by stale cookies and a speech about self-sacrifice virtues. You nod wisely, resisting the urge to ask if you could sacrifice yourself directly into a warm bath. The pastor thanks everyone for their dedication. Someone jokes about leisured ladies and you collect your sewing and slip away, cheeks pink from combining mild accomplishment and maximum boredom. Congratulations. Another afternoon spent rescuing the world one meaningless hem at a time. You may never witness your good work's results, but you've certainly given the town conversation topics. Until next week's gathering, if you're a mother, aunt, or unlucky older sister, you're responsible for small children with large personalities. This involves herding, bribing, and negotiating truces with people who still believe in magical creatures. Victorian children may appear angelic in their tiny sailor outfits and starched aprons, but don't be deceived. They're miniature chaos bundles with marathon runner stamina and negotiation skills rivaling Victorian lawyers. The day starts early, usually with shrieks from the nursery indicating someone's consumed their decorative fruit or, more likely, tested whether their doll swims in the chamber pot. The nursery becomes your battlefield and your weapons are limited. Stern expressions, hollow threats, and a refreshingly large jar of hard candy. The governess technically commands, but if you're the nearest adult, or worse, the sole adult present, you become final authority on all disputes, injuries, and moral crises. You serve as judge, jury, and on terrible days, amateur physician with lavender water and vague leech knowledge. Morning activities require strategic planning. Unstructured time invites catastrophe, so you assign duties with military precision, letter blocks for the oldest, hoops and sticks for the middle ones, and for the youngest, supervised cat observation. Everyone has responsibilities. No one, including the cat, wants to fulfill them. Breakfast tests patience and diplomacy. You attempt coaxing porridge into tiny mouths while deflecting complaints about lumps, temperature, and the philosophical question of why jam never appears. At least 2 cups get overturned, someone's toast lands under the table, and minor rebellion erupts when you announce no honey until after lessons. If you escape breakfast without porridge in your hair or jam on your sleeves, you're already winning. Lessons commence, and suddenly every child becomes a distraction expert. Mathematics brings tears, spelling causes rebellion, and anything French produces terror, usually reserved for dangerous animals. You've never witnessed anyone develop copybook allergies so rapidly. Half the time, you're uncertain whether you're teaching the alphabet or managing a slow-motion fight over who gets the good writing slate outdoors comes next. Victorian wisdom insists children need fresh air and exercise, preferably where neighbours can evaluate your parenting. You bundle children into coats, hats, gloves, and on difficult days, scarves so thick they resemble mobile snowmen. The park walk becomes an adventure. Puddles attract magnetically. Dogs prove irresistible. And everyone wants collecting the kind of stick that would make Victorian mothers swoon. If it rains, which, this being England, it does, children get confined to the playroom where their creativity flourishes through elaborate schemes, secret societies, and occasionally highly illegal indoor cricket. You spend afternoons mediating arguments, resolving agreements, and occasionally bribing peace with extra cookies. By late afternoon, spirits run high and tempers grow short. You read stories, play shadow games, and hope moral virtue tales somehow absorb through osmosis. Children finally get returned to the governess for ceremonial evening washing, a process resulting in clean faces, damp rugs, and, on one memorable occasion, a missing frog. Supervision focuses less on maintaining control and more on surviving until bedtime without losing your voice, your sanity, or your last piece of candy. Victorian children with their lace collars and mischievous grins represent both your greatest joy and greatest challenge. You emerge from the nursery frazzled but victorious, ready for adult conversation and, if fortunate, a few moments of actual quiet. Until tomorrow, when battle resumes and the tiny humans with their opinions, their questions and their remarkable aim with utensils rise again, single. Lucky you. Every social gathering becomes a minefield of eligible gentlemen, awkward dancing and mysterious stains on your gloves. You must appear charming, interested, and absolutely not desperate, even when your future depends on it. The Victorian marriage market essentially becomes a high-stakes chess game played in petticoats, with everyone's mother watching from the sidelines. From the moment you're declared socially available, every outing, tea, or garden walk becomes strategic opportunity for romantic advancement or, equally likely, social disaster. Let's begin with introductions. You meet potential suitors in settings designed to maximize awkwardness: a cousin's garden party, the annual church bazaar, or a dance where lighting stays dim enough to blur unfortunate features but bright enough to make clumsy footwork painfully obvious. Every eligible gentleman gets introduced with a prospect summary: owns a modest estate in the countryside, from excellent family, or sometimes remarkably skilled at card games. None of these details guarantee interesting conversation or a future free from marital disappointment. The dance floor reveals true personalities. You must navigate a maze of formal dances while avoiding direct eye contact with anyone's mother. A misstep could mean scandal, or even worse, a proposal from Mr. Thompson, who smells faintly of vegetables and hasn't blinked since autumn. Your gloves collect mysterious marks, ink, preserves, possibly regret, while you strive appearing effortlessly radiant and not at all like you just deflected a second cousin twice removed. Then comes parlour conversation, where suitors attempt cleverness and you're expected laughing at appropriate moments, all while secretly wondering if good teeth and steady income really suffice for building a life. The etiquette exhausts. Flirtation must be obvious enough signalling interest, but subtle enough avoiding criticism. A misplaced giggle or slightly too bold comment becomes tomorrow's parlour gossip. If you're not careful, you might find yourself seated beside a gentleman who insists describing his bug collection for an entire hour. Congratulations, you're courting disaster literally. There are also letters exchanged secretively under watchful chaperone eyes. Each note exercises coded language. Since saying too much or too little can lead to rumours, misunderstandings, or very awkward conversations with your mother, you treasure a single pressed flower between pages. Or decode whether respectfully yours means genuine affection or just good penmanship. Your family naturally monitors your every action. Your mother has supernatural ability detecting unsuitable matches, while your father's only requirement involves your suitor not bankrupting the family or accidentally igniting the stables. Aunt Martha, meanwhile, maintains a running count of eligible men and isn't above introducing you to all of them in one afternoon. The stakes feel impossibly elevated. One wrong choice leaves you unmarried, doomed to lifelong embroidery and assisting with other people's children. Every moment requires balancing. Appear interested but not desperate. Be clever but not too clever. Display your needlework, but don't appear too industrious lest you seem like you're seeking employment instead of a husband. You dream of a partner who sees you beyond your dowry or your family name, but you settle for one who can discuss something besides livestock. Occasionally a truly decent suitor appears, kind, reasonably handsome, and with only mild tendency sweating through his neckwear. Maybe he even asks about your interests or shares novel appreciation. But blink and you'll miss your opportunity. The Victorian dating pool resembles more puddle than pond, and competition stays fierce. Ultimately, surviving the suitor challenge focuses less on discovering true love and more on avoiding disaster with dignity intact. If you emerge with only a few awkward proposals, some ambiguous poetry, and all your gloves returned, Consider yourself a champion of the age-old Victorian courtship game. The real Olympic sport of Victorian life involves not slipping up and causing scandal. This requires navigating the minefield of rules about hats, gloves, letters, unchaperoned walks, and being seen with the wrong cousin at the wrong time. Welcome to Victorian self-preservation artistry, where one false move can transform you from respectable young lady into afternoon's cautionary tale faster than you can say cream soup. Scandal lurks behind every lace curtain. To avoid it, you must maintain vigilance levels that would make secret agents weep. First, the dress code. Hats must be worn outside, but heaven help you if you forget removing yours indoors. Gloves are required for any excursion. Yes, even quick garden strolls. If you're caught bare-handed, expect a week's speculation about your rebellious tendencies. Buttons must be fastened, shoelaces tied, and most importantly, nothing, absolutely nothing, should ever suggest an ankle. Then there are correspondence rules. Letters to men require ruthless chaperoning. If you receive a note, it must pass through your mother's hands, the butler's, and probably the entire village before you can safely read it. Even ink colour faces judgment. Black stays proper, blue seems daring, and anything scented will have the parlour in uproar. By evening, don't consider sealing with affection unless your goal involves having your romantic aspirations discussed over tea for the next decade. Chaperones themselves represent an entire scandal prevention industry. Want to walk? Bring a chaperone. Want to visit friends? Chaperone. Want to glance at a man publicly? Better hope your great aunt stays within reach, ready to leap between you and disaster. The unchaperoned walk represents the original forbidden fruit. One bite and your reputation crumbles. Never mind that your only companion was a well-behaved sheepdog. Dining creates its own minefield. A single mistake at the table can end your social standing. Soup must be sipped, not slurped. Bread gets broken, not cut. Napkins go in your lap. Never, under any circumstances, tucked into your collar like some kind of continental radical. And for goodness sake, don't let your spoon clatter, or someone will whisper about your nerves. But the real danger lies in being observed. Observed with the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong place. A stroll with a second cousin after sunset sufficiently sends the rumour mill into overdrive. Two unmarried people talking in a greenhouse. Scandal. Being caught laughing too loudly with the pastor's nephew. Double scandal, and possibly an unplanned engagement. If you're truly unfortunate, your scandal might not even be your doing. A sneeze during church service, a trip over your skirt on Main Street, or an unfortunate incident involving a runaway hat can all earn you a place in the social penalty box. Damage control becomes essential skill. Apologies must be swift, humble, and ideally delivered by your mother. You'll need to perfect the "it was all a misunderstanding" expression and develop an extensive vocabulary of vague explanations. Sometimes you just must wait it out. Scandal has fresh milk's shelf life, and sooner or later someone else will trip over the garden hose or drop their purse in the duck pond. The cruelest part? Scandal rarely concerns what you actually did. It's about what people think you might have done. Guilt by association, suspicion by proximity. The best you can hope for involves making it through the season with your dignity, your dance card, and your reputation intact. So you tiptoe through the day, gloved, chaperoned, and wary of soup, knowing that at any moment history might remember you as the girl who set the standard for social exile with nothing more than an untimely sneeze and a slightly risque hat ribbon. Victorian life. Come for the tea, stay for the daily obstacle course. Evening brings the main event, dinner. It's a 3-hour parade of courses, each more puzzling than the last. You'll be expected keeping up with both the silverware and the conversation while never admitting you dislike gelatin. Victorian dinner isn't just a meal, it's an ordeal, a grand, glittering performance that tests every family member's acting abilities. By the time you sit down, you've already survived a wardrobe change, a pre-dinner sherry, and at least one stern lecture on proper napkin folding. Now positioned at the edge of a table long enough to land a small aircraft, you are both guest and exhibit, the first challenge the place setting. There are more forks than you have fingers, an intimidating array of spoons, and at least 3 knives, each intended for different, equally mysterious dishes. You've studied the etiquette books, so you know to work from outside in, but there's always a rogue utensil, usually the fish fork lurking, waiting to expose you as a culinary imposter. Water glasses glint accusingly, bread plates taunt you from your left or maybe your right depending on who last rearranged the table. And then the parade begins. Course after course arrives, each more elaborate and inexplicable than the last. Soup, served at molten lava temperature, gets sipped silently with utmost restraint. Fish follows, usually accompanied by sauce that's either exquisite or alarming, and you never know which until too late. There's roast of something, a mysterious pie, a selection of vegetables boiled into submission, and if you're truly unlucky, a wobbly, suspiciously jiggling mound of gelatin that everyone pretends enjoying. Conversation proves as complex as the menu. The hostess guides conversation with practiced skill, directing talk toward harmless subjects. Weather patterns, foreign correspondence, or the modest success of the West Gardens hydrangeas. Men debate politics in hushed civil tones while women trade carefully worded praise. What an original gown you've chosen this season. You're expected to chuckle, agree, and offer precisely the correct contribution. Too much risks seeming argumentative, too little appears boring. Casual conversation becomes a battlefield. Each story must entertain without offending. Mention a relative's betrothal, but ensure the match is respectable. Reference last weekend's dance, but avoid mentioning whose dress got torn. When awkward silence looms, deploy the reliable backup. How delicious is this broth? A query no one answers truthfully. Then there's the timing. Supper crawls at social nervousness pace, too slow for your growling belly, too quick for sneaky garden escapes. Just when you think it's finished, staff emerge with yet another dish. Wild fowl, chilled roast, a dessert steamed beyond recognition, then finally the selection of cheeses. You grab cheese like an exhausted runner hitting the tape, only to discover there's still sweets, beverages, and one final course. Throughout, you're acting, maintaining straight posture, spotless fingers, and calm expression. Dislike something? Smile and manage at least one courteous nibble. Then skillfully shuffle your plate to appear you've eaten. Never outright refuse a serving. Such rudeness could haunt family stories for decades. Eventually, the feast concludes. Beverages are poured, chatter softens, and visitors drift toward the parlour, relieved to survive another test of dining endurance. Your belly is satisfied, your mind is dulled, and you're already dreading tomorrow's remnants. Supper. More than nourishment, it's advanced training in survival tactics and pretending to appreciate jellied meats. Mission accomplished. You're now certified for lifelong small talk and perhaps a late-night bite. You can't simply retire. Next comes an array of drawing room diversions, forced recitations, and acting games so artificial you'd prefer scrubbing the outhouse. You'll politely giggle at identical jokes nightly because the option is being branded troublesome. Victorian nights stretch endlessly with mandatory fun, all for society's betterment. The meal gong barely fades before you're shuffled to the sitting room where furnishings are subtly repositioned and everyone's courteous facade reaches peak tolerance. No escaping to your chamber with reading material, not until you've endured 2 hours of wholesome, mildly competitive and often puzzling amusement. The host, disturbingly enthusiastic, presents activities like unveiling cosmic mysteries. Acting games, naturally, remain eternally popular among newcomers. Victorian charades involves less wild pantomiming and more performing brief scenes from famous books, verses, or theatrical works. If you've never attempted miming the Lady of Shalott while Aunt Bertha hollers, "Vegetables? It's vegetables?" Congratulations. Your suffering continues. Enter parlour diversions, each crafted to encourage good spirits while creating potential humiliation minefields. The Parson's cat stays classic. Players describe the feline with fresh adjectives, circling alphabetically. The Parson's cat is an agreeable cat, a bothersome cat, a cranky cat, until someone loses track or invents words like bilious, triggering gentle laughter and mild mortification. Should charades and word challenges fail inspiring enthusiasm, dramatic performances await. Here's where the family's aspiring actor, typically a relative passionate about metre and rhythm, unleashes their Shakespeare obsession. You sit through endless verses of ancient maritime poetry delivered so intensely you worry the carpet might spontaneously combust. There's always a pause when Uncle Harold requests something lighter, only to receive passionate Macbeth excerpts. The display earns thunderous clapping from several bewildered relatives expecting comedy. Music might follow, the piano opens, sheet music rustles, and you pray you won't be volunteered again. The youngest performs yesterday's lesson. The eldest cousin croons a ballad outlasting dinner itself, while everyone hums along, pretending harmony. Best case scenario, the household dog stays quiet, though he usually joins with more genuine enthusiasm than anyone present. Occasionally, someone suggests blindfolded tag or flaming raisin games with genuine injury potential and honest excitement. More typically, evenings conclude with 20 questions, which inevitably becomes arguments about whether ostriches qualify as furniture or penalties, mainly excuses for forcing people to sing, dance, or recite embarrassing verse publicly. Through everything, you grin and chuckle appropriately, avoiding accusations of antisocial behaviour. You applaud performances, fake surprise at plot twists, and eagerly guess answers while secretly counting minutes until freedom. Nobody dares suggest simply sitting quietly, risking labels as malcontents or worse, returning to word games with Aunt Bertha. Finally, the clock strikes salvation. Games end, the room gets restored, and you're permitted to head bedward, face muscles aching from polite amusement and spirit slightly frayed. But you've fulfilled obligations, survived forced entertainment, maintained peace, and preserved the delicate Victorian pretense that charades, parlour games, and dramatic readings represent humanity's pinnacle of joy. Well done. You've weathered another evening of compulsory celebration. Rest peacefully. Tomorrow might demand Lady of Shalott again, so prepare accordingly. At last, you steal precious solitary moments for journal writing, blessing contemplation and private despair over your entire day being neighbour evaluated. The house finally settles. No more parlour entertainment, no more obligatory applause, and for 30 blessed minutes nobody hovering to critique your bearing or inquire about correspondence. You position yourself by flickering candlelight at your small writing table, a worn but cherished notebook waiting, and an inkwell that invariably smudges your nose. Writing becomes sacred ritual, tiny rebellion against a day spent performing for others. This remains your only authentic space, though your frankest entries resemble small complaint catalogues and near-catastrophe inventories. Tuesday escaped Aunt Bertha's matchmaking by feigning unconsciousness. Almost worth the headache. The soup featured aspic again. You spill details nobody else grasps, the torture of stays tightened 2 inches excessively, the victory of remembering proper utensils at supper, and the pure thrill of pilfering preserves undetected. Your journal's official voice stays grateful and measured, but the undertone screams pure, concentrated fatigue. You catalogue blessings, reasonable health despite blisters, and persistent existential gloom. A decent family even with their post-dinner poetry habits, and shelter overhead, preferably rodent-free. For future readers, you include lines about needlework satisfaction and properly maintained houseplants. But underneath, Your journal serves as emotional release valve. Here you admit endless social visits, perfectly pressed linens and marathon charades rounds aren't actually your happiness definition. You record secret worries. Will mother ever approve my hair accessories? Did anyone notice my near napkin fumble at dinner? What if I perish and they publish this publicly? Dear Journal, today was lovely. There's the hidden version. Dear Journal, today was bearable. Writing also provides private dreaming space. You outline secret ambitions, continental travel, novel publication under bold pseudonyms, or on rebellious nights, purchasing personal millinery without committee consultation. The writing process, slow and intentional, reminds you that you possess a mind. Even after spending afternoons pretending interest in Aunt Augusta's embroidery samples, sometimes you attempt philosophy. Does life offer more than household bookkeeping and birthday remembrance? Can someone be perfectly mannered and completely satisfied? Or must you choose? You exhale, recognizing Victorian society builds on compromise artistry between expectations and truth, reputation and identity. As the flame dims, your eyelids droop and penmanship deteriorates from careful script to exhausted scribbling. You conclude entries with vague hopes for less tiring, more meaningful tomorrows, or minimally reduced aspic encounters. You shut the journal, secure it in your locked compartment, and savour privacy, a commodity rarer than gems in a world where even thoughts need respectability. Using remaining energy, you slip into bed and let your mind drift, comforted knowing that for nightly minutes you exist solely for yourself. Sleep arrives as gentle mercy, and tomorrow brings repetition with slightly more cleverness, determination, and existential anxiety. Congratulations. You've survived another Victorian day, documented secret truths, and quietly preserved your spirit. Before retiring, you must remove hairpins, say prayers, and possibly negotiate with the Almighty for corset-free dreams. Bedtime becomes an ordeal, and rest resembles social experimentation more than certainty. Evening in Victorian households arrives softly, but not without complications. Candlelight dances against wallpaper, the house groans settling, and you realise your day isn't finished. There's rigid, unwinding routine, a ritual gauntlet ensuring both physical and moral cleanliness plus reasonable odds of surviving until morning without becoming tomorrow's scandal. Hair comes first. Victorian hairstyling requires engineering, needing roughly 30 minutes nightly dismantling. You start removing a tiny weapon collection of pins, anywhere from 15 to 50, depending on the day's supposedly simple arrangement. Hopefully, none drop into the wash basin. You brush hair with long, purposeful strokes, 100 if you're seeking sainthood or maternal approval, trying not to consider how many family secrets tangle in the strands. After hair comes face cleansing, always a shocking experience. The water stays cold, soap feels suspiciously chunky, and the towel could substitute as sandpaper. You wash away daily powder and concerns, watching your reflection in the murky mirror, while attempting to scrub off lingering breakfast conversation anxieties. Once your face returns somewhat to original condition, you examine skin for fresh blemishes, as if each represents personal failure or spinsterhood omens. Now for the spiritual segment, evening prayers. You kneel beside your bed, hands clasped, reciting identical memorized passages you've mumbled since childhood. But tonight, maybe you sneak in personal requests, something about increased patience with Aunt Bertha, miraculous jam stain remedies, and perhaps once, dreams where you wear pants and do something genuinely scandalous, like bicycle riding or refusing second aspic helpings. Bedtime itself becomes an event. The bed forms a blanket and pillow fortress, built against notorious English cold. You slide between chilled linens, careful avoiding patches missed by the warming bottle. If you're especially lucky, your bedroom fire still glows. Otherwise, you convince yourself that shivering builds character. But sleep eludes Victorian minds. Instead, you lie awake, cataloguing daily embarrassments and tomorrow's worries. Did you bid Lady Prescott farewell or good evening at tea? Did you remember winding the clock, shutting the window and hiding your journal from nosy siblings? Your brain races through social calculations, each more disastrous than previous, until you surrender and listen to wind-rattling window panes. In those final drowsy moments, you face existential dread accompanying Victorian womanhood, the sensation that your life stays constantly displayed, your value measured in manners, and even in darkness. Someone might judge your snoring. You seek peace, knowing that for now you've survived mostly intact and only slightly traumatized by jellied meat. Eventually, thoughts slow, your body relaxes, and you drift away, hoping for nights free of corset, dreams, scandals, or accidentally addressing the minister as mother. Congratulations, you've completed nightly rituals. Tomorrow brings fresh starts, armed with hairbrush, prayer, and faint hope for slightly less existential bedtimes. Sleep well in Victorian England, that's all anyone can expect. Catch a cold, and you're instantly bedridden, surrounded by concerned relatives and rotating questionable medical authorities. You'll receive treatments from mustard compresses to complete denial. First illness signs, a sneeze, cough, or chilliness complaint sends households into panic. News spreads faster than actual germs. Within moments, your mother, housekeeper, and minimum 3 aunts cluster bedside, clutching handkerchiefs and reciting family medical wisdom. You must rest, they demand, while simultaneously requesting detailed recalls of recent meals, yesterday's fresh air intake, and whether your feet encountered moisture. Victorian sick days equally balance drama and inconvenience. The sick room prepares with royal birth urgency. Curtains close, camphor scents fill air, and someone delivers weak tea and plain toast trays. The fire burns at oddly punishing temperatures, as if perspiration universally heals. You're tucked under sufficient blankets to suffocate symptoms and breathing hopes. A bell stays within reach, not for comfort summoning, but for calling more symptom interrogators. Enter home treatments. Relatives rotate through humour-drawing remedies. Someone produces patent medicine bottles promising cold, cough, rickets, and possibly original sin relief. It tastes like liquid leather polish and burns throughout. Failing that, there's popular mustard plasters, applied with masonry gentleness. It burns, itches, and leaves you questioning whether cures actually punish complaints. Medical professionals, if summoned, arrive with personal horrors. The family physician combines wisdom and gambling, ready prescribing everything from bloodsuckers for certainty to system-cleansing purgatives. The less fortunate encounter neighbours with homeopathic tendencies, recommending everything from lavender compresses to neck-worn fresh onions. You comply mainly because resistance demands more energy than available, and you're already half convinced you're dying from tedium. Meanwhile, families debate over your bedside, all in carefully modulated whispers. Is it merely a minor ailment or something that's hanging on? Should you be permitted to read, or will the thrill of a romance novel throw you into delirium? Each cup of tea is given with the gravity of medicine. Every cough is met with worry, guidance, or in Aunt Bertha's case, an endless story about how she almost died from a cold but was rescued by brisk walks and a shocking amount of bacon grease. Rest is the official treatment, but genuine sleep remains elusive. The door squeaks open every 10 minutes. Servants tending the fire, brothers and sisters sneaking peeks, family members just ensuring you're still among the living. The only quiet comes in the early morning hours when you can lie still, wrapped in your fortress of blankets, and dream of a world where a touch of sniffles is met with nothing more than a peaceful nap and a pile of scandalous books. Getting better is equally dramatic. You're praised for your courage. Such a model patient barely complained at all, and you're gently guided back into household duties, though banned from strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. Unless naturally you're needed for a particularly tedious social visit. Well done. You've endured the Victorian sick day, medicated, overheated, questioned, and finally released back into society. And if that cough lingers, you'd better keep it quiet. Trust me, you don't want to repeat this ordeal until at least Christmas. Under all those layers of manners and ruffles, every Victorian woman keeps secret delights and forbidden pleasures, whether it's sneaking candy, reading prohibited books, or simply fantasizing about a world where trousers are acceptable. On the surface, your existence is an endless march of proper behaviour, refined skills, and polite self-control. But behind every perfectly arranged lace curtain lies a whole hidden world. The reality is, even the most respectable young lady has her guilty indulgences, and more often than not, she's become quite skilled at concealing them. Let's begin with the obvious: sweets. Officially, you consume sugar only during approved meal times and always with the moderation expected of someone whose figure is under public examination. But oh, the excitement of slipping an extra chocolate from the sitting room dish when no one's looking, or grabbing a handful of crystallized violets from the jar Aunt Prudence believes is purely decorative. Some nights, you and your most reliable friend might even sneak into the pantry for a spoonful of preserves. Shocking, messy, and absolutely worth the danger. If anyone notices the missing sugar, you simply point fingers at the children, the cat, or that mysterious draft. Books offer another path to the forbidden. You display a proper volume on your bedside table. Perhaps a young lady's manual for moral improvement or wise sayings for every situation. But hidden underneath, safely concealed from curious eyes, lies a well-worn copy of the latest thriller. Sensational tales of murder, mystery, and heroines who dare to have emotions. Maybe you trade books with your bolder friends, each of you mastering the art of disguising your reading material in plain brown wrappers when anyone draws near. If you're particularly daring, you might even own a smuggled French novel, snuck from a relative's luggage and read by flickering candlelight, pulse racing with every page turn. And then there's the clothing fantasy. Pants, the simple, wonderful freedom of not having to wrestle with 7 pounds of petticoats every time you want to sit or exit a room. It's not just about ease, it's about imagining walking quickly through the garden, scaling a tree, or heaven help us, actually running for pure joy. In your most private moments, you picture an alternate reality where ladies can wear trousers, have pockets, and aren't judged for what's inside them. But not all secrets are so harmless. Some women maintain a supply of calming drops, or a bottle of wine for those especially challenging afternoons enduring family chaos or Aunt Bertha's piano performances. You might keep a hidden collection of passionate letters, old love notes, unsigned poems, or a message from a potential suitor that you treasure more for the excitement than the romance. For the artistically gifted, there are forbidden drawings, caricatures of your family, fanciful designs for hats you'd never dare wear, or even a surprisingly realistic sketch of the groundskeeper, strictly for artistic practice, naturally. Then there are the aspirations that never leave your diary, secret goals, adventure, writing, performing on stage, or becoming an explorer in a world that only pretends to permit such things for women. Sometimes you sketch your future self on horseback, behind a podium, or simply alone in a room where nobody questions your activities. The fact that these must remain secret reveals more about society than about you. Still, the best-kept secret is simply the joy of solitude. 10 stolen minutes in the garden, a few pages read in the storage room, a private laugh at an absurd hat, or a whispered joke with a friend who understands just how ridiculous all this propriety truly is. And so, while the outside world observes a model of decorum, inside you maintain a rich private existence. A world of small rebellions, secret pleasures, and dreams that make the corsets, the idle chatter, and even the gelatin worth tolerating. Because what nobody acknowledges is that being a Victorian woman is a masterclass in endurance, and the real entertainment always happens after everyone else has gone. Every proper Victorian woman requires fresh air, which is why you're now undertaking a morning stroll that's equal parts exercise and competitive social performance. With a guardian 2 paces behind and a parasol positioned just right, you glide down the avenue at the exact pace that declares, "I'm above gossip, but not above critiquing your bonnet." Walking is less about fitness and more about visibility, ideally by the proper people and definitely never by anyone hawking fish. The preparations for an appropriate walk rival those of a small military campaign. First, you choose a dress that's sufficiently stylish, but not so striking that it invites whispers from the neighbours. Gloves are mandatory, preferably spotless, since nothing screams fallen woman like grass stains on your fingertips. Your shoes must be suitable for cobblestones, yet delicate enough to suggest you've never chased a carriage in your existence. And don't overlook your hat, positioned at precisely the right angle to frame your face in a way that implies both modest virtue and just the slightest hint of intrigue. Your chaperone, whether mother, aunt, or mildly disapproving family friend, examines your ensemble with eyes sharp enough to slice silk. She fixes your neckline, clicks her tongue at a wayward curl, and equips herself with a purse large enough to hold smelling salts, a small prayer book, and enough mints to sustain both of you until noon. Together, you leave the house as a unit, but definitely not as equals. The street becomes a bustling theatre. You're not simply taking a walk, you're participating in the grand spectacle of neighbourhood society. Every housewife at her window, every wandering child, every shopkeeper polishing his storefront serves as both spectator and critic. You nod graciously to acquaintances, exchange precisely measured smiles with possible rivals, and offer a tiny gesture to any friend not currently suspected of impropriety. There are protocols to this parade. Never walk so quickly that you seem hurried. What exactly are you escaping? But never linger either, lest someone assume you're lingering for attention or, God forbid, hoping to glimpse that new assistant at the hat shop. Sidewalk manoeuvring becomes its own competition, a delicate ballet of yielding, advancing, and gracefully avoiding any suggestion of actual effort. The only thing more hazardous than stumbling over loose stones is making eye contact with the local fish seller, who might bellow greetings that include details about your family's cod purchases. Social suicide. The parasol, meanwhile, serves as more than sun protection. It's your finest accessory. You spin it with elegant ease, using it to communicate disapproval with a sharp snap, curiosity with a subtle tilt toward a particularly well-dressed passerby, or absolute horror when a stray dog approaches too closely, or, worse still, an unaccompanied gentleman. The skill of parasol work is saying everything while remaining silent. If fortune smiles, your path will lead through the park, where you can appreciate the flower displays, engage in brief, appropriately boring conversation with fellow walkers, and be observed by exactly the correct number of eligible bachelors, no more, no fewer. You pause to watch the ducks, which judge less harshly than your neighbours, and share harmless gossip with your chaperone, who somehow makes questions about someone's roses sound like warnings about spiritual corruption. There are always complications. A sudden downpour threatens to curl your hair and destroy your composure. An escaped child nearly crashes into your skirts, causing gasps and lectures about proper behaviour. You expertly avoid stepping in anything that might stain your boots or your reputation. The walk ends with a victorious homecoming, cheeks lightly flushed, dignity preserved, and just enough wind in your hat to suggest that yes, you have embraced nature. Your chaperone pronounces the expedition successful. No swooning, no scandal, and not a single fish vendor in sight. Congratulations. You've paraded down the street for absolutely no reason, performed the intricate dance of Victorian respectability, and returned triumphant. Until tomorrow, when the performance begins anew and your parasol waits, ready for its next act. If you're fortunate enough to possess a garden, congratulations. You've discovered the era's most acceptable excuse to dig in the dirt and pretend you're too occupied to field nosy questions about marriage possibilities. Victorian gardening is less about cultivating vegetables and more about competing for the crown of most unnecessary rosebush. You kneel in the earth, pruning flowers and nurturing a deep, quiet competition with Mrs. Pennywhistle next door, whose chrysanthemums are frankly showing off. In society's view, gardening represents the one truly virtuous hobby. Unlike music, which risks becoming too passionate, or reading, which might inspire dangerous thoughts, caring for your flower beds is an unquestionable mark of good character. It's also a rare opportunity for some honest physical work, though naturally you must never admit to enjoying it. There's a careful routine to the entire affair. Kneel on a cushion to prevent soiling your dress, wear gloves to preserve your gentle hands, and handle your trowel with the practiced manner of someone who has definitely studied gardening in the ladies' publications. The garden becomes a canvas for your hopes, frustrations, and social aspirations. Every border, every climbing rose, every suspiciously exotic tulip represents both a personal victory and a not-so-subtle message to visitors. Yes, I have refinement. No, I did not eliminate my husband and bury him beneath the wisteria, regardless of what Mrs. Pennywhistle suggests. The planting choices spark endless debates: bluebells for humility, violets for modesty, a single dramatic lily for that hint of mystery if the mood strikes. Of course, the real motivation for gardening is strategic. There's no better excuse for avoiding an uncomfortable afternoon tea or dodging a persistent suitor than claiming the sweet peas simply cannot wait another moment. You can always vanish behind the laurel hedge when Aunt Bertha is spotted approaching, pruning shears in hand and your most thoughtful expression ready. Few dare interrupt a woman who is clearly on a mission to defeat plant disease and overbearing relatives in one afternoon. But make no mistake, gardening is also warfare. Your most formidable enemy always lives next door. Mrs. Pennywhistle has devoted years to perfecting her borders, spreading rumours about your dahlias, and making false claims about her prize-winning fertiliser. You pretend not to notice when she leans over the fence to critique your weeding methods or volunteers unwanted advice about the proper depth for planting bulbs. Sometimes she appears to be trimming her roses, but you know she's actually counting your blooms. And honestly, you've done exactly the same, perhaps with a slightly superior attitude. Despite the rivalry, gardening offers a rare haven of tranquility in your schedule. The smell of fresh soil, the soft buzz of bees, and the occasional thrill of discovering a perfect, unobserved earthworm provide simple joy that almost compensates for the endless rounds of needlework and forced conversation. Here, among the marigolds and pansies, you can indulge in fantasies, listen to the world quietly lose its mind around you, and get soil under your nails with no witnesses except the robins. Your mother approves, provided you avoid sunburn and unladylike amounts of exertion. Your siblings ignore you, convinced you're performing some sort of penance. The garden becomes your refuge, your battlefield, your silent counselling session, a place where you can grow something beautiful or at least keep your hands occupied while plotting next week's clever comeback for Mrs. Pennywhistle. As the afternoon fades, you step back to admire your work. The flower beds look triumphant, the grass is respectably uniform, and your rival's chrysanthemums, though still insufferable, appear just slightly less smug. You brush off your gloves, adjust your hat, and head inside, feeling oddly victorious. Gardening. Proof that sometimes the best way to survive Victorian womanhood is to dig deep, plant boldly, and let the neighbours simmer in their jealousy. Today's schedule reads dress fitting, which is Victorian language for voluntary paralysis while strangers stab you with pins. You stand on a small platform, arms extended, while a seamstress mutters quietly about your posture, and a distant relative offers unwelcome advice about sleeve length. The fitting continues long enough for you to contemplate every cookie you've ever consumed and question whether you actually like the colour mauve. Victorian dress fittings are an elaborate endurance test, a mixture of silent suffering, awkward self-examination, and the constant danger of being stabbed by someone with more opinions than patience. The day starts with an atmosphere of hushed significance. You're led into the fitting room, a place where time freezes, and the only guarantee is that someone will measure your waist and then hint that it might benefit from just a bit more restraint. First comes the ceremony of undressing. Layers are removed like the leaves of a very anxious onion. outer dress, underskirt, petticoat, corset cover, and the corset itself, which, for the record, never seems to fit identically twice. Each garment is carefully folded and set aside, while you try not to think about the chill and hope nobody comments on your undergarments. The seamstress approaches with a pincushion strapped to her arm and an expression that says we're about to discover how much you really enjoy pastries. Then the fabric is draped and pinned with the accuracy of a military exercise. The bodice is fitted, the skirts arranged, and yards of material swirl around you like a very ornate straitjacket. Your task is to remain perfectly motionless, breathe lightly, and fight the urge to scratch your nose, an itch that only intensifies as the minutes crawl by. Meanwhile, the commentary section gathers. Your mother sits close by, providing gentle encouragement and less gentle reminders that we want this gown to be elegant and timeless, not attention-grabbing. A relative or two wander in, helpfully contributing thoughts like, have you considered fuller sleeves? Or that shade is quite bold. The seamstress grunts, tugs, and pins, her whispered observations ranging from the bust is generous. Translation, you're destined for more boning, to we'll just expand the waist half an inch, someone's been indulging in pastries. Every inch of you gets measured, poked, and examined. You've never been more conscious of your own form. Is your stance correct? Are your arms equal length? Did you actually put on weight? Or is mauve just a cruel colour? You stare ahead, watching dust particles dance in the sunlight and trying to mentally draft your next journal entry. Survived another fitting. Lost sensation in left foot. May never view velvet the same way again. The process moves at an agonising pace. Every seam must be flawless, every hem level, every detail discussed, modified, and then discussed once more. If you dare to sigh or shift your weight, the seamstress sighs louder and announces, if you can't stand still now, how do you expect to endure a 3-hour dinner party? You bite back the urge to respond with optimism and comfortable shoes. The grand finale arrives when you're finally permitted to see yourself in the full-length mirror. There you stand, the dress taking form, pins catching the afternoon light, a vision of Victorian elegance. At least until someone mentions that the trim needs adjustment or the bustle could be more pronounced. You nod as though you comprehend the politics of bustles and try to ignore the existential question burning in your thoughts. Is all this really worthwhile for a single garden party? When you're finally freed, you shed the test garments, thank the seamstress who's already planning your next fitting, and escape with a sense of achievement mixed with mild trauma. You're one step closer to owning a dress that will be the envy of the neighbourhood, or at least the only one in mauve. Congratulations, you've survived the dress fitting, a lesson in patience, posture, and the peculiar human ability to suffer for fashion. Your house is technically staffed, but each day brings fresh opportunities to perfect the delicate Victorian art of the polite complaint. The coal bucket is half full, the footman's hair is slightly too contemporary, and someone has relocated your favourite chair 3 inches to the left, possibly as part of a household rebellion. You channel your inner commander, deliver veiled orders, and prepare for the next battle in the ongoing domestic Cold War. Victorian households operate on a steady supply of discipline, protocol, and subtle psychological warfare. As the lady of the house, you're expected to keep everyone in line, maintain flawless standards, and accomplish it all with the kind of gentle authority that suggests both command and deep wells of patience, even when you possess neither. The official rule, never raise your voice. The unofficial rule, never let them see you losing control. The daily procession of minor infractions begins with a morning inspection. You move through the house with the measured steps of royalty on an unannounced visit, noting with hawk-like precision every speck of dust, crooked cushion, and slightly drooping plant. The maid who dusts your writing desk is consistently cheerful, which makes it twice as difficult to mention that the silver inkwell now carries a faint aroma of onions. You smile, and with a voice so steady it borders on menacing, you say perhaps next time just a touch less vigour with the polish, Mary. It's a delicate performance. You must never complain outright, but instead employ an arsenal of euphemisms and backhanded compliments. The soup was quite unique tonight, cook. Perhaps tomorrow something a bit more conventional, or to the footman. What an eye-catching hairstyle, John. Is it European? The most powerful phrase in your vocabulary is I wonder if we might attempt it this way, which roughly translates to do this immediately, or I shall perish from humiliation before lunch. And there are always mysterious events. The coal bucket, for example, is never quite filled. Is it the new kitchen maid, or has the butler declared private war on warmth? You're never entirely certain, but you drop subtle hints. How chilly the parlour feels this morning. Perhaps we could be extra generous with the coal. The chair, inexplicably moved, becomes the focus of a week-long investigation as you carefully mention to everyone within hearing of the culprit how perfectly the light in this corner suits reading. Sometimes, naturally, your efforts backfire. The staff, operating under their own parallel command structure, develop silent codes for household rebellion. The salt is never in the same location twice. The housekeeper insists the chair must be moved for better airflow. The gardener mysteriously forgets to trim Mrs. Pennywhistle's side of the hedge. You issue directives, receive bland confirmations, and wait for the next inevitably creative uprising. Your only defence is mastering the art of gentle escalation. Start with a soft reminder. Follow with a slightly more direct suggestion. When all else fails, you deploy the ultimate weapon, a visit from your mother or the minister. Both guaranteed to inspire sudden, miraculous improvement in standards for at least 2 days. Yet through all this, you're also expected to be compassionate, attentive, and never ever forget a birthday or special occasion. You remember preferred teas, ask about ill relatives, and distribute modest gifts at Christmas, even while quietly planning a complete reorganisation of the kitchen staff. The objective is harmony, but the reality is constant negotiation, a Cold War fought with silver trays and pressed napkins. At day's end, you sink into your perfectly repositioned chair, contemplating your victories. The fire blazes, the soup is palatable, and the footman's hair is, well, still a bit too European, but you'll address that tomorrow. Congratulations. You've survived another round of the servant challenge, demonstrating all the strategic brilliance of a field marshal and the patience of a saint. In Victorian England, this is simply what's expected. So here we stand at the close of a day in a Victorian woman's life. If you navigated the corsets, the calling cards, the garden competitions, and the daily obstacle course of social expectations, congratulations. You've survived what was essentially history's longest job interview with fewer snacks and significantly more embroidery. It's tempting to laugh at the etiquette, the endless small talk, and the absurdity of fainting couches, but the truth is these women were Olympic-level survivors in a world where even sitting could be a test of moral fibre. They handled judgment with grace, transformed boredom into artistry, and managed to appear unbothered while single-handedly sustaining the letter-writing industry. They were executives in crinolines, ambassadors in bonnets, and masters at pretending they weren't about to collapse from the fourth layer of petticoats. So tonight, as you settle into your soft, supportive, probably non-horsehair mattress, perhaps whisper gratitude to the generations before you who endured rigid schedules, impossible expectations, and the kind of discomfort that would make a modern chiropractor cry. Be thankful for elastic waistbands, indoor plumbing, and the freedom to leave your house without a hat, or at all. Because history may be awkward, inconvenient, and just a little absurd, but it's also evidence that people are endlessly adaptable, quietly resilient, and occasionally extremely amusing. Let that thought settle as you drift off. You don't have to compose a thank you note to your neighbour for the privilege of borrowing sugar, and nobody's critiquing your nightgown. Sleep peacefully knowing you've earned it without a single fainting couch in sight. Good night.